Hello, everybody. As you all probably know, very soon on the 11th of August, I'm going to be starting a Jaimini Level 1 webinar course. And I thought I would share with you today a technique from that course so you can get an idea of just a small portion of some of the things that we're going to be teaching on that course. So just to let you know, the course starts the 11th of August. It's a live webinar course that's going to run for 44 weeks from basically the 11th of August until the following July. We're going to take a break over the holidays from mid-November until the beginning of January. And so much to share on this course. Basically, Jaimini Astrology excels at showing the concrete realities of an individual's life, and it's one of the best predictive systems. So, of course, we're going to be learning at least two of the most important Jaimini Rashi Dashas on this course, as well as a lot of the fundamentals of how to work with the Jaimini system, plus tons of different ways to identify things in a person's horoscope, everything from the type of emotional environment they're most comfortable in, to the type of house they'll live in, to what types of career that an individual might have. And this particular technique, which is called weapons. Now that might sound crazy because, in this modern day and age, we, don't go using things like, a bow and a sword and things like that quite often. But there is another use for this particular technique because it lets us know how an individual, number one, approaches stressful situations, or number two, how they tend to handle arguments. And that's something that's pretty interesting to look into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some particular chart examples so we get some ideas of how people tend to handle things. And they're just going to be anonymized charts. So we'll go in to the astrology software and we'll take a look from there. So what we want to do first of all with this technique is to identify something called the Atmakaraka. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with what the Atmakaraka is, it's the planet that occupies the highest number of degrees in any sign in the main birth chart, which is also called the Rashi chart. So for instance, in this particular horoscope, we can see that Saturn is at 24 degrees of Sagittarius. Because of that, that makes Saturn the Atmakaraka. So what we're looking for ideally are planets that conjunct Saturn, either in the Navamsha chart, which is the first chart that we want to examine, or if Saturn is not conjunct a planet in the Navamsha chart, we want to look in the Rashi chart. So let's look in the Navamsha chart first. And here we see Saturn in Scorpio, and there's nothing conjuncting it. So then when we go and we look at the Rashi chart, we see that Saturn is alone in Sagittarius. And so if Saturn isn't conjunct any other planets, then we just take Saturn as being the indicator of the type of weapon that the individual will use. Now here's what Jaimini has to say about Saturn. He says, Saturn in that place, a bow. And so what that means is people who have Saturn as the Atmakaraka with no planets joining it in either the Navamsha or the Rashi chart, well, they might be adept at using a bow. They might technically be good at using a bow and arrow. But what that means in terms of how the individual will deal with stress is, if you think about it, when somebody's using a bow, they're usually hiding in a safe place whereby they can take, the arrow and shoot it at the individual from a distance with pinpointed accuracy. So the Saturn approach to arguments, and equally the Saturn approach to battle in terms of that, would be one where the individual feels like they need to be in a safe place from where they can then, take their attack, but from a distance where they themselves can't be hurt. So these would be the type of people in an argument that would turn away and walk away from the argument and then give a little parting barb on the way out the door where they know that there's not going to be any response to it. Or they may call you on the phone from a distance and then hang up the phone after they've said what they need to say. So that's the Saturn approach to arguments. This is pretty interesting, isn't it, right? So let's take a look at another chart. And we're going to do a few here. So the next one that we have to look at, I believe, is this one where we have Mars as the Atmakaraka. So Mars is the Atmakaraka. And when we look at this in the, we're looking at the Rashi chart here. So let's start with the Navamsha chart. When we look at Mars in the Navamsha chart, Mars is conjunct with Ketu. When we look at Mars in the Rashi chart, what we'll see is that Mars is conjunct the Sun. So we know it's either going to be Ketu or the Sun, but which one is it? We want the one that's going to be the strongest, okay? So when we look at the Sun and we examine the Sun's dignity, let me just move my head out of the way here. When we examine the Sun's dignity, what we see is that the Sun is in a friend sign, okay? But when we go and we examine Ketu, Ketu's in Mercury sign, so we take the dignity of Mercury in order to determine the strength of Ketu, okay? And Mercury in the Navamsha chart is in a great friend sign. So Ketu is the stronger of the two. So Ketu would be the weapon that this individual would use. And so here's what Jaimini has to say about Ketu. Jaimini says Ketu is one with time devices. One with time devices. Now, he doesn't mean they'll, hurl a bomb. Actually, what he means in this particular instance is they will give things time. So they will be a strategist in regards to a situation. If it's on a battlefield, they'll give time for the battle to evolve before they figure out what they're going to do about it. In terms of an argument, this would be the type of individual who goes, all right, I'm just going to give this some space and some time to resolve itself rather than getting involved in it. Okay, so that's the Ketu approach to arguments, and that's Ketu as a weapon. So let's look at one more. I believe it was this one. So when we look at this, we can see the moon is the Atmakaraka because it's at 21 degrees and 58 minutes in the Rashi chart. When we go and when we look at the moon in the Rashi, since we're in the Rashi, let's look here first. But you always want to take the Navamsha chart as well. And you're looking for the stronger planet in either the Navamsha or the Rashi chart. The moon's not joining anybody in the Rashi chart. So then we go and we look at the Navamsha chart, where you have the moon joining Rahu. Now, Rahu is a pretty special one. What Jaimini has to say about Rahu is one with metal mechanical instruments. So what does that mean in terms of a weapon? Well, that would have been siege machines in older times, right? In modern times, that's things like, atom bombs and things like that. So in terms of how that particular approach would come across in an argument, these would be the type of people who would want to bombard you with an argument and kind of come at you with everything, proving absolutely how you positively have to be wrong. And then when you try to give a rebuttal, overriding your rebuttal until finally you just submit because of the strength of the person's approach to the situation. That's the Rahu approach to arguments. So this is a real interesting technique because it helps us to understand how individuals interact, how they're going to approach stress. So if we want to understand Rahu with stress, if a person's approaching a stressful situation, they're going to try to really bombard that problem with as much energy as they possibly can to make sure that it completely goes away, right? So the K2 approach to a problem or a crisis would be to give things time to resolve. The Saturn approach to a problem or a crisis would be to get oneself in a safe place first and to deal with that difficulty from a distance. So there are a few more that are included in the system, but I just wanted to show you a few. If you want to learn the rest of them, plus there are so many other techniques that we're going to be sharing on this course, please do feel free to register for the Jaimini webinar course. That starts on the 11th of August. which is a Saturday, and it's going to be at 4:30 p.m. UK time. That's 4:30 p.m. London time. All of this you can find out at the link, which should be up above in the video right about this moment in time. That's going to do it for this brief video on this Jaimini technique. Until next time, please do take the very, very best care of yourself. Bye now.